The Kansas plains stretched endlessly under the merciless August sun of 1885, a sea of brown grass rippling in waves that seemed to mock the very notion of escape. The Whitmore Ranch sat like a scar upon the land, 300 acres of cattle country bordered by barbed wire that gleamed like teeth in the harsh light. To most folks passing through Dodge City, it looked like prosperity. To Clara Whitmore, it was a prison without bars. The main house squatted low against the horizon, built of timber hauled from Colorado at great expense. Jebediah Whitmore had insisted on the finest materials, just as he insisted on the finest cattle, the finest horses, and a wife who would never dare speak unless spoken to. The house had 8 rooms, but Clara knew every corner where she could hide when his footsteps grew heavy with whiskey and rage. She stood at the kitchen window that morning, her hands raw from lye soap and endless washing. Through the glass, warped by summer heat, she watched the ranch hands driving cattle toward the eastern pasture. They moved with purpose, these men who answered to her husband's bark and whip. Not one would meet her eyes when they came to the house for their pay. They knew. Everyone knew. But in the frontier code of 1885, what happened between a man and his wife was nobody's business but God's, and God seemed to have forgotten this corner of Kansas entirely. Clara's reflection caught her eye in the window glass. At 26, she should have been in the bloom of womanhood, but the face staring back looked decades older. Her blonde hair, once her pride, hung limp and dull beneath the kerchief she wore to hide the bruises that sometimes crept up her neck. Her dress, a faded calico that had seen too many washings, hung loose on her thinning frame. Jebediah liked her that way, weak, fragile, easy to break. The sound of spurs on the porch made her flinch. But it was only Tom Garrett, the foreman, come to get the week's provisions list. She opened the door just wide enough to hand him the paper, her movements quick and furtive as a prairie mouse. "Ma'am?" Tom touched his hat brim, his weathered face carefully neutral. He was a good man, she thought, or at least not a cruel one. But even good men looked the other way when Jebediah Whitmore was involved. The day crawled by in its familiar pattern. Bread to bake, clothes to mend, floors to scrub until her knees bled through her petticoats. Always moving, always working, because stillness invited his attention and attention invited pain. The bruises on her ribs, hidden beneath corset and chemise, throbbed with each breath. Last Tuesday's lesson, when she'd forgotten to have his cigars ready after supper. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of blood and brass, Clara heard the thunder of hooves that announced Jebediah's return from town. Her stomach clenched like a fist. She smoothed her apron, checked that his whiskey was set out just so, that his chair faced the right angle, that nothing was out of place. He burst through the door like a storm-given flesh, all 6 feet and 200 pounds of him, reeking of sweat, cattle, and the saloon. His face, once handsome in a brutal way, had grown coarse with drink and cruelty. At 38, Jebediah Whitmore was the most successful rancher in 3 counties and the most feared. "Where's my supper?" The words came out slurred. He'd been drinking since noon. Then, the worst nights always started that way. "It's ready, Jebediah. Beef stew. Just how you like it." Clara kept her voice soft, submissive, the way he demanded. He grunted, dropping into his chair with enough force to make the table jump. She served him quickly, efficiently, then retreated to the corner by the stove. Some nights he wanted her to sit with him. Most nights he preferred her invisible. Tonight seemed to be the latter, until— "You been talking to that Garrett?" The question came sharp as a knife blade. Only to give him the provisions list. Husband. Nothing more. The backhand came so fast she didn't see it, only felt the explosion of pain across her cheek and the taste of copper in her mouth. The blow sent her stumbling against the wall. "Don't lie to me. Woman, I saw how he looked at you." Clara pressed her hand to her face, feeling the warmth of blood where his ring had cut her cheek. "I swear, Jebediah, I only—" "Shut your mouth." He stood, swaying slightly, his massive frame blocking out the lamplight. "You think I'm stupid? Think I don't know what goes on in that head of yours? The beating that followed was methodical, practiced. He knew where to strike to cause the most pain while leaving the fewest visible marks. Clara had learned not to cry out. It only made him angrier. She curled into herself, protecting her stomach and face, enduring each blow like a tree endures the wind. It would pass. It always passed. And then would come the worst part, when his rage turned to another kind of violence that left no bruises on the body, but carved deep scars on the soul. Later, much later, when his snores shook the bedroom walls, Clara lay still as death beside him. Every breath sent fire through her ribs. Her left eye had swollen shut, but worse than the physical pain was the certainty that had been growing in her mind for months. One day, he would go too far. One day, she would not get up again. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it brought a strange kind of clarity. If she was going to die anyway, why not die trying to live? Moving carefully, inch by painful inch, she slipped from the bed. Jebediah had drunk himself into a stupor deeper than usual, a blessing from whatever angels still watched over the forsaken. In the kitchen, she found the coffee tin where she'd hidden a few coins over the months. Stolen pennies from the household money, $3.47. Not much, but it might buy her a ticket on the stage, if she could reach town. She dressed in the dark, choosing her sturdiest boots and the wool dress that would best survive travel. From the pantry, she took a half loaf of bread, some dried beef, and filled a canteen with water. Her hands shook as she wrapped these meager supplies in a blanket. 26 years of life. And it all came down to what she could carry on her back. At the door, she paused. Through the window, the ranch spread out under starlight, vast and empty as the space between salvation and damnation. To the east lay Dodge City and the railroad, but also Jebediah's friends, men who would drag her back for the price of a drink. To the west stretched the territories, wild lands where the law was whatever a man with a gun said it was. But there was no law that had protected her here. In this civilized place, perhaps she'd find more mercy among the outlaws and wolves. Clara eased open the door, wincing as the hinges groaned. The night air hit her damaged face like a blessing, cool and clean. She stepped onto the porch, then froze as one of the ranch dogs lifted its head. But this was Blue, the old shepherd who sometimes came to her for scraps and gentle words. He whined softly, tail wagging, and she knelt despite the pain to stroke his graying muzzle. "Goodbye, boy," she whispered. "Take care of the chickens for me." Then she was moving, a shadow among shadows, keeping to the path she'd memorized during years of walks to the henhouse, the garden, the well, at the fence line. She paused one last time to look back. The house slept, dark and quiet. Soon enough, Jebediah would wake to find his property gone. He would rage. He would hunt. But for now, for these precious hours, she was free. Clara Whitmore slipped through the fence and began walking west, toward the mountains that rose like a promise on the horizon. Behind her, she left everything she had ever known. Ahead lay the unknown territories, where death waited in 1,000 forms. Thirst, exposure, wild animals, wilder men. But as her boots found their rhythm on the hard-packed earth, as the stars wheeled overhead in their eternal dance, Clara felt something she hadn't experienced in 7 years of marriage. Hope. It was a dangerous feeling for a woman alone on the frontier. It was also the only thing that could keep her walking through the pain, through the fear, through the vast darkness that separated her from whatever destiny waited in those distant hills. The coyotes began their nightly chorus as she passed the last marker of Whitmore land. Their wild music seemed to welcome her into their world, a world without walls, without masters, without the constant weight of terror that had shaped her days. Clara pulled her shawl tighter and walked on, leaving no trail but footprints that the morning wind would erase, carrying nothing but determination and the fierce will to survive that had finally overcome her fear of trying. The world swam back into focus slowly, like looking through water that gradually stilled. Clara's first sensation was warmth, not the oppressive heat of the Kansas sun, but something gentler, accompanied by the sweet smell of burning piñon wood. She lay on something soft, softer than anything in the Whitmore house, buffalo hide, her foggy mind supplied. Dressed and worked to butter smoothness, her body felt strange, lighter somehow. The burning pain in her foot had dulled to a distant throb. Someone had removed her boots. Someone had tended to her. That thought sent panic shooting through her veins. Clara's eyes snapped open, her body tensing for flight despite its weakness. The space around her was dim, lit only by a small fire crackling in a stone-ringed hearth. Log walls chinked with mud. A roof of wooden shakes and canvas. Herbs hung from the rafters, sage, yarrow, something that might have been feverfew. Easy. The voice came from the shadows near the door, low and steady as distant thunder. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs as a figure moved into the firelight. The man was tall but not massive like Jebediah, built lean and hard as a winter wolf. He wore rough canvas pants and a cotton shirt rolled to the elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle and marked by old scars. A kerchief hung loose around his neck, his face. Clara couldn't quite make out his features in the shifting light, but his eyes caught the fire's glow, dark eyes that watched her with the patient wariness of a wild thing. "Where?" Her voice came out as a croak. Her throat felt like she'd swallowed sand. Without a word, the man reached for a tin cup on a shelf and filled it from a water bucket. He approached slowly, telegraphing his movements the way one might with a spooked horse. When he held out the cup, Clara had to choose between her thirst and her fear. Thirst won. She struggled to sit up, gasping as the movement sent fire through her ribs. The man didn't touch her, didn't offer to help, just held the cup steady until she could take it with shaking hands. The water tasted of minerals and snow, impossibly clean after the alkali-tainted wells of home. Home. The word had sat strange in her mind. That place had never been home. "Drink slow," the man said, settling back on his haunches a careful distance away. "You've been out for 2 days. 2 days. Terror clutched at her chest. "He'll find me. He'll—" "No one's finding anyone up here." The man's voice carried quiet certainty. "Storm washed out your tracks before I even got you back. Besides, we're 30 miles from the nearest ranch, and that's as the crow flies." Clara stared at him, trying to process this. 30 miles. She'd walked that far. The last thing she remembered was the sunset, the rocks, falling. "My foot? Cut deep, but clean. No poison set in. You're lucky." He paused, studying her with those watchful eyes. "Or maybe not so lucky." Considering. Heat flooded Clara's face. He'd seen the bruises, then, of course he had. Whoever had tended her injuries would have seen everything Jebediah had done. "I fell," she said automatically, the lie bitter on her tongue. The man just looked at her, saying nothing. Somehow his silence was worse than questions would have been. "I should go." Clara tried to swing her legs off the bed, but the room tilted sickeningly. "You should stay put unless you fancy dying of exposure." He stood in one fluid movement, moving to tend the fire. "Name Silas Kane. This is my place. You're safe here." Safe. The word seemed foreign as Chinese. Clara watched him add wood to the fire, noticed how he moved. Economical, purposeful, every gesture deliberate. This was a man who'd learned not to waste motion, not to make sound. A man who lived prepared for trouble. She hesitated. Giving her name felt dangerous, but lying felt worse. Clara Whitmore. If he recognized the name. He gave no sign. "There's stew in the pot, venison and wild onions. You should eat." Clara's stomach clenched with hunger, but old habits died hard. "I couldn't impose. You're not imposing. You're surviving." Silas filled a bowl from the iron pot hanging near the fire. "Way I see it, person's got a right to that." He set the bowl on a wooden crate beside the bed, again maintaining that careful distance. Clara noticed he wore a gun, a worn Colt Navy in a holster that had seen better days. But his hands, as they ladled the stew, were gentle. The first spoonful nearly made her weep. Hot food, seasoned with more than salt and spite. She ate slowly, aware of his eyes on her, aware too of her own appearance. Her dress was gone, replaced by a man's shirt that fell past her knees. Her hair hung loose and tangled. She must look like a madwoman. "Thank you," she managed between bites. Silas just nodded, settling into a chair near the door. He pulled out a knife and a piece of wood, began carving with smooth, practiced strokes. The silence stretched between them, but it wasn't the heavy silence of the Whitmore house. This was different, a quiet that didn't demand to be filled. "You live here alone?" The question slipped out before Clara could stop it. Mostly. A ghost of something that might have been a smile touched his lips. "Sometimes the elk come calling. There's a black bear denned up the ridge who thinks he owns the place, and the ravens are always carrying on about something. Despite everything." Clara felt her own mouth curve slightly. "Must get lonely." Lonely's not the worst thing a person can be. Their eyes met across the fire-lit space, and Clara saw understanding there. This man knew about running, knew about choosing solitude over suffering. "I'll be moving on soon as I can walk," she said. "Will you now?" Silas focused on his carving. "And where might you be heading?" Clara opened her mouth to answer and realized she had no idea. West, she thought, away, but beyond that, "I don't know," she admitted. "Well then," he held up the piece of wood, examining it in the firelight. Clara could see it taking shape, a bird of some kind. "Seems to me a person who doesn't know where they're going might as well not go there in a hurry." "I can't stay here. I've brought you trouble enough." "Haven't seen any trouble yet." "You will. My husband." She couldn't finish. "Your husband beats women." Silas's voice remained level, but something flickered in his eyes. "Seen the proof of that clearly enough. Question is, what do you plan to do about it?" Clara stared at him. No one had ever asked her that. Not the minister who'd seen her split lips at Sunday service. Not the doctor's wife who'd tutted over her blackened eyes. They'd all known, and they'd all looked away. But this stranger in his mountain cabin looked straight at her and asked what she meant to do. "I ran," she said finally. "That's a start. He'll come after me. Might be he will. He has friends, money, men who'll track for him. Might be he does." Clara's frustration boiled over. "You don't understand. Jebediah Whitmore doesn't lose. Not cattle, not card games, and certainly not his wife. He'll tear this territory apart looking for me." Silas set down his carving, fixed her with those steady eyes. "What I understand is that you walked 30 miles through rough country on a cut foot and climbed near 1,000 feet elevation while beat half to death. Takes a particular kind of strength to do that. Kind of strength that maybe Mr. Whitmore hasn't reckoned with yet." The words hit Clara like cold water. She'd never thought of herself as strong. Stubborn, maybe. Desperate, certainly, but strong. "I should rest," she said, suddenly exhausted. Silas nodded, standing. "I'll be outside if you need anything. Gotta check the snares." He pulled on a leather coat and hat, then paused at the door. "There's a rifle in the corner, loaded. You know how to use it?" Clara shook her head. "Might be something to learn. Then, when you're feeling up to it." He stepped out into the night, leaving Clara alone with the fire and her churning thoughts. A rifle in the corner. For her to use, not to threaten her, but to protect herself. The concept was so foreign she could hardly grasp it. She lay back against the buffalo hide, staring at the play of shadows on the ceiling. Somewhere out there, Jebediah was discovering her absence. She could picture his rage, the furniture he'd destroy, the men he'd send searching. But for the first time in 7 years, she wasn't there to bear the brunt of it. The cabin was small but clean, she noticed. Everything in its place, but not with the rigid orderliness Jebediah demanded. This was the home of someone who lived deliberately, who'd chosen each item for its purpose. Books sat on a shelf. Actual books, not just the Bible and Farmer's Almanac. A guitar hung on one wall. Small touches of beauty. A piece of quartz catching the firelight. Dried flowers in a clay jar. Clara found herself wondering about Silas Kane. What kind of man lived alone in the mountains? Days from the nearest town? What was he running from or toward? When he returned an hour later, bringing the smell of pine and cold air, she pretended to be asleep. Through slitted eyes, she watched him bank the fire, check the door's heavy bar, and settle into his chair. He didn't approach the bed, didn't even look in her direction. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Clara fell into true sleep, not the fitful, fearful dozing of recent years, but deep rest. And when nightmares came, Jebediah's face, his fists, his weight, she woke to find Silas still in his chair, carving by firelight, standing guard against dangers both real and remembered. "Just a dream," he said without looking up, his voice carrying across the darkness like a lifeline. "Nothing here but the wind and the mountains. Go back to sleep." And somehow, impossibly, she did. The morning sun painted the red rocks in shades of copper and gold as Clara followed Silas along a narrow deer trail. 2 weeks had passed since she'd awakened in his cabin, and her foot had healed enough for short walks. She still favored it, but the sharp pain had faded to a dull ache that reminded her, with every step, that she was alive and moving forward. "See there?" Silas pointed to marks in the dust. "Coyote, probably the female from the den below Cathedral Rock. She's got pups." Clara studied the tracks, trying to see what he saw. To her eyes, they looked like any other animal prints. But Silas read the land like scripture. Over the past days, he'd begun teaching her, not with the harsh commands Jebediah had used, but with quiet observations, letting her discover things for herself. "How do you know it's female?" "Smaller than the male's print, deeper at the toes. She's hunting heavy, bringing food back." He moved on, pointing out other signs, a tuft of rabbit fur caught on thorns, the scratch marks where a bear had marked its territory, the specific way elk bedded down in the meadow grass. Clara found herself absorbed in this new language of the wilderness. In Kansas, she'd known only the controlled world of the ranch, cattle, horses, chickens, all bent to human will. Here, life followed older patterns. They climbed to a ledge overlooking the valley, where Silas had set snares for rabbits. The view stole Clara's breath. Miles of untamed country spread below, painted in reds and purples and golds. Eagles circled on thermals far above. She'd never imagined the world could be so vast, so beautiful, so free of fences. "First time I saw this," Silas said, checking a snare, "I knew I'd found where I needed to be." "How long have you lived here?" 6 years come winter." He reset the snare with practiced movements. "Built the cabin myself. Took most of a summer." Clara tried to imagine it, choosing this isolation, building a life with your own hands far from anywhere. "Weren't you lonely?" "I was running from something worse than loneliness." His voice carried weight. "Lost someone. My fault. Couldn't live with the civilized world after that." She waited, but he offered no more. Clara understood. Some stories cut too deep for easy telling. They worked in companionable silence. Gathering herbs she was learning to identify: willow bark for pain, echinacea for sickness, yarrow for wounds. Silas showed her which plants were medicine and which were poison, how to harvest without killing the plant, where to look for the best specimens. On the way back, they surprised a doe drinking at a spring. The animal froze, liquid eyes meeting Clara's for a long moment before bounding away with white tail flashing. Clara felt something ease in her chest. Beautiful things could survive here. Perhaps she could too. That afternoon, Silas set up empty cans on a fallen log. "Time you learn to shoot." Clara stared at the rifle he held out. A Winchester .73, well maintained, but showing its years. "I don't know. Knowledge won't hurt you. Ignorance might." He demonstrated how to hold it, how to sight along the barrel. "It's a tool, nothing more, like a hammer or a cookpot." The gun felt alien in Clara's hands, heavy with possibility. Jebediah had kept his guns locked away, said women had no business with weapons. Just another way to keep her helpless. "Breathe out slow, squeeze gentle," Silas instructed. standing close enough to adjust her stance but not touching. The gun wants to shoot straight. Don't fight it. Clara's first shot went wide, the recoil surprising her. The second hit the log below the cans, but the third sent a can spinning, and despite herself, she smiled. "Natural eye," Silas observed. "Few more days' practice. You'll be out shooting me." "Doubt that." But she raised the rifle again, feeling something new. Power, maybe, or just the absence of powerlessness. As purple twilight settled over the mountains, they shared a simple meal of rabbit stew and cornbread. Clara had taken over much of the cooking, finding comfort in the familiar task made new by freedom. She could season as she liked, cook what she pleased, eat when hungry rather than at appointed times. "Why do you help me?" The question emerged as they sat by the fire. "You don't know me. I could bring nothing but trouble." Silas was quiet long enough that she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Man finds someone hurt. He helps. That's all." "It's not all." Clara studied his profile in the firelight, the strong jaw, the lines carved by sun and sorrow. "You could have taken me to town, left me at the doctor's." "Could have." He met her eyes. "But I know what it's like to need a place where nobody asks questions, where you can figure out who you are when you're not running or fighting or surviving day to day." Clara's throat tightened. That was exactly what this was, a place out of time, where she could remember who Clara was before she became Mrs. Whitmore, before the fear, before the fists. "I was 17 when I married him," she heard herself say. "My father owed him money, gambling debts. Jebediah offered to forgive them in exchange for—" She gestured at herself. "That's not a marriage. That's a sale." The blunt words hit like cold water. Clara had never thought of it that way. But he was right. She'd been currency, traded to settle a debt. First year wasn't so bad. He could be charming when he wanted. Then the drinking got worse. The cattle market dropped. He lost money, lost face. And I was there to take it out on. "Don't," Silas's voice came sharp. "Don't make excuses for him. I'm not—" "You are. Heard it in your voice. The drinking, the money. Those are reasons you tell yourself. Truth is simpler. He hurt you because he could, because he wanted to, because it made him feel big." Clara stared at him, something cracking open in her chest. 7 years of telling herself if she was better, quieter, more perfect, he wouldn't hit her. 7 years of believing it was somehow her fault. "You're right," she whispered. Then louder, "You're right." They sat with that truth between them as the fire crackled down to embers. Finally, Silas stood, stretched. "Storm coming tomorrow. Can smell it on the wind. We should bring in extra wood." Such a small word to mean so much. Clara rose to help, and as she did, her hand brushed his. Both froze. It was the first time they'd touched since he'd carried her to the cabin. Clara waited for the flinch, the instinctive recoil that Jebediah had trained into her. Instead, she felt only warmth, calluses that spoke of honest work, strength held in check. Silas looked down at their hands, then up at her face. Something shifted in his expression, a softening that made him look younger, more vulnerable. "Clara," he started, then stopped, drew back, gentle but definite. "We should get that wood." The moment passed, but it left something changed between them. As they worked side by side, stacking wood under the lean-to, Clara kept stealing glances at him. This man who asked nothing of her, who offered safety without price, who looked at her and saw not property or victim, but a person worth teaching, worth protecting, worth knowing. That night, the storm Silas had predicted rolled in with magnificent fury. Thunder shook the cabin walls. Lightning turned the world white and black in sharp relief. Rain hammered the roof like bullets. Clara woke gasping from nightmares. Jebediah's face mixed with the storm's violence. But instead of his bulk looming over her, she saw Silas sitting by the window. "Keeping watch. Just weather," he said softly. "Mountains make their own storms. Nothing coming but rain." She sat up, pulled the blanket around her shoulders. "Do you ever sleep?" "When it's needful." And when you have a fugitive in your cabin. You're not a fugitive. You're a guest. He turned from the window. How's the foot? Better. Barely hurts now. Good. Tomorrow, if the rain stops. Thought we might ride up to the high meadow. Elk should be gathering. Pretty sight. I'd like that. Clara hesitated. Silas, what you said about losing someone. Another time. His voice closed that door gently but firmly. Some stories need daylight. This one's for darker hours than these. She understood. Her own story felt too raw for deep night, when shadows had weight and memory grew teeth. Tell me about the mountains instead, she said. How you learned to read the land. So he did, his voice weaving through the storm sounds as he spoke of an old Apache man who'd taught him tracking, of seasons spent learning the language of stone and stream, of the patient way the land revealed its secrets to those who listened. Clara found herself drifting back towards sleep, lulled by his voice and the storm's rhythm. Just before she slipped under, she heard him say, quietly as breath, Glad you're here, Clara Whitmore. Glad you found your way to my door. In the morning, she would pretend she hadn't heard, but through the night, those words wrapped around her like another blanket, warm and surprising and precious as the first spring thaw. The rifle kicked against Clara's shoulder as another can went spinning off the log. 4 shots, 4 hits. Her hands no longer trembled when she loaded the Winchester, and her stance had become natural as breathing. 3 weeks of practice had transformed her from someone who flinched at the sight of a gun to someone who could defend herself. You're getting too good, Silas observed, a hint of pride coloring his usual reserve. Going to have to start charging you for ammunition. Clara lowered the rifle, turning to him with what she realized was a genuine smile, the kind that reached her eyes and didn't hurt. I'll trade you 2 pies for a box of cartridges. Deal. He moved to reset the targets. Though your aim's getting sharp enough, might should ask for 3 pies. It had become their way, this gentle teasing. Nothing like Jebediah's cruel jokes at her expense, but a sharing of humor that assumed equality. Clara found herself treasuring these small exchanges, storing them up like provisions against future hunger. The November air carried winter's promise, sharp and clean. They'd ridden to a plateau above the cabin where the view stretched for miles. Clara had learned to ride astride like a man, another freedom that would have scandalized proper society. But there was no society here, only the mountains and the sky and this careful dance she and Silas performed around each other. Riders coming? Silas's words cut through her contentment like a blade. She followed his gaze to see dust rising from the valley trail, perhaps 3 miles distant. Her blood turned to ice. Could be anyone, he said, but his hand had moved to his holster. Trappers, maybe, or miners heading to the claims up north. Clara knew better. After 6 weeks, she'd let herself believe she was safe. But safety was an illusion for women like her. They rode back to the cabin at a pace just shy of panic. Silas checked his weapons while Clara packed, if packing was what you could call throwing her few possessions into a saddlebag. Her hands shook as they had that night in Kansas, but this time anger mixed with the fear. She'd found something here, something precious and fragile as spring ice, and now it would shatter. You don't run unless you need to, Silas said, checking the loads in his Colt. Could be nothing? It's not nothing. You know it's not. He met her eyes, and she saw he did know. Then we handle it. We? The word stopped her cold. No, this is my trouble. I won't have you. Clara. He spoke her name like it was the only word that mattered. You think I'd let you face him alone? You don't understand. Jebediah's not just violent. He's smart. He'll have the law on his side. Marriage papers, legal right. The words tasted like ashes. Kill him, and they'll hang you for murdering a man defending his property. Let me worry about that. No! The word came out fierce. I won't have your blood on my hands. I won't. He crossed to her in 2 strides, caught her shoulders gently. It was the first time he'd touched her deliberately since that night by the woodpile. Listen to me. Whatever comes, we face it. That's what people do when they... He stopped, jaw working. When they what? But the moment for words had passed. Hoofbeats drummed up the trail. Silas released her, moved to the window. His shoulders tensed. 4 men, one's wearing a badge. Clara's knees nearly buckled. Of course, Jebediah would come wrapped in law's authority. Turn her flight into theft or abandonment or whatever lie served his purpose. Back door, she whispered. I can make the ravine. Circle back for a horse tonight. No. Silas turned from the window, and she saw something in him she'd only glimpsed before. The man who'd chosen these mountains wasn't just running from grief. He was a man who'd known violence, dealt it, survived it. You stay right here. Let's see what they want. The knock came heavy, authoritative. Silas checked his gun once more, then opened the door. Clara recognized Sheriff Briggs from Dodge City, gray-bearded, weathered, wearing righteousness-like armor. Behind him stood 3 men she didn't know, hard-faced and travel-worn. They'd ridden far and fast. Silas Kane. Briggs touched his hat brim, polite but wary. Everyone knew caution was wise with men who lived alone in the high country. Sheriff Briggs out of Dodge, looking for a woman might have passed this way. That so? Silas leaned against the doorframe, casual as summer. What's she done? Run off from her husband. Man's worried sick. Briggs's eyes tried to peer past Silas into the cabin. Clara Whitmore, small thing, blonde hair, probably hurt. Her husband says she's touched in the head. Needs protecting from herself. The lie hit Clara like a slap. Touched in the head. It was perfect. Who'd believe a mad woman's tales of abuse? Haven't seen anyone like that. Silas's voice carried just the right amount of disinterest. Don't get many visitors up here. One of the deputies, a ferret-faced man with cold eyes, spoke up. Mind if we look around? Long ride to come up empty. I do mind. Silas shifted slightly, hand resting easy on his gun. Man's home is private. Now, no need for unpleasantness. Briggs said. We're all lawful men here, just doing a job. Husband's offering good money for information. $50. 60. Ferretface corrected. Went up to 60 yesterday. Clara closed her eyes. Jebediah was buying her back like stray livestock. Not interested in blood money. Silas said. The sheriff's eyes sharpened. Funny way to put it. You sure you haven't seen her? I've seen plenty of hurt women in my time. They usually have good reason for running. Tension crackled between the men. Clara held her breath, one hand on the rifle Silas had taught her to use. If shooting started, she wouldn't hide. Not again. Then Briggs stepped back. Decision made. Well, if you do see her, Kane, you remember, law's on the husband's side. Woman belongs with her family. I'll keep that in mind. They stared at each other a moment longer. Then Briggs turned to his men. Let's go. Check the Riley place next. They mounted up, but Ferretface lingered, studying the cabin with calculating eyes. Smoke's coming pretty steady for a man alone, like maybe someone's been cooking. Silas smiled. And it wasn't a pleasant thing. I eat regular. That a crime in Kansas now? No crime. Ferretface wheeled his horse. But $60 buys a lot of information. Man might remember things he forgot. They rode off in a clatter of hooves and dust. Silas stood in the doorway until they disappeared down the trail, then closed the door and leaned against it. They'll be back, Clara said. Maybe. Not maybe. That one. The deputy. He knows. He'll work on the others. Convince them. She was pacing now, energy crackling through her like lightning seeking ground. I have to go. Tonight. Head south. Maybe Mexico. Clara. I'll need supplies. Not much. Just enough to... Clara. Stronger now. You can say you never saw me. They can't prove... He caught her arms, held her still. Not harsh like Jebediah, but firm enough to stop her spiral. Look at me. She did, seeing her own fear reflected in his dark eyes. But something else too. Something that made her chest tight. You're not running, he said. I have to. Don't you see? They'll come back with more men. Or Jebediah himself. And when they do, we'll be ready. both of us." "Why?" The word broke from her like a sob. "Why would you risk everything for someone you barely know?" His hands gentled on her arms, thumbs brushing the fabric of her sleeves. "You know why." And God help her, she did. It had been building between them like summer thunder, in shared silences, stolen glances, the careful distance they maintained that only emphasized what pulled them together. She'd felt it that first night when he'd carved by firelight while she pretended to sleep. Felt it every time he taught her something new. Every time he smiled at her small victories. Every time he looked at her and saw Clara, not property. "Don't," she whispered. "Please, I can't. I'm still married, still his under the law. And even if I weren't, I'm broken, used up. You don't want—" "I want you alive," he interrupted. "I want you free. I want you to stop believing the lies he beat into you. The rest—" He released her, stepped back. "The rest can wait." Clara stared at him. This man who offered what she'd never had, choice, time, respect for her wounds and her boundaries. "They'll destroy you for helping me," she said. "Maybe." He moved to the stove, poured coffee with steady hands. "Been destroyed before. Survived it. Question is, what do you want to do?" "I want—" Clara stopped, overwhelmed by the possibilities contained in those two words. What did she want? For so long, want had been trained out of her, beaten down, forbidden. "I want to stop running. I want to stop being afraid. I want—" She looked at him, this good man in his simple cabin, offering her nothing but everything. "I want to stay," she admitted. "Here, with you, but I can't let you pay for my choices. Seems to me that's my choice to make." He handed her the coffee, their fingers brushing. This time, neither pulled away. "Your husband comes here. He'll find more than he bargained for. These mountains have their own law." "You'd kill for me?" The question hung between them like smoke. "I'd kill to keep anyone from dragging you back to that life. No hesitation, no doubt. Done worse for less reason." Clara saw the truth of it in his eyes. This man had known violence, perhaps been shaped by it. But unlike Jebediah, he'd chosen to step away from it, to build this quiet life far from the world's cruelties. Now he'd step back into that darkness for her. "I won't ask that of you," she said softly. "You're not asking, I'm offering." They stood in the cabin's warmth. Outside, winter pressing close, and Clara felt something crack open in her chest, not breaking, but thawing, like ice giving way to spring runoff, painful and necessary and inevitable. "All right," she said finally. "We stay, we prepare, and if they come—" "When they come," Silas corrected. "Man like your husband doesn't give up easy." "When they come," she agreed. "We face them, together." He nodded, satisfied. "I'll teach you the trails out back, places to ford up if needed. Cache some supplies. A woman who can shoot like you shouldn't have to run from anyone." That night, Clara lay awake listening to Silas move about the cabin, checking weapons, planning defenses. She thought of the sheriff's words, "Woman belongs with her family," as if she were a stray dog to be returned to its owner. But here in this cabin, with this man who saw her as human, who offered partnership instead of possession, Clara felt something she'd never expected, the fierce desire to fight, not just for survival, but for the life she was building, for the right to choose her own path. When Silas finally settled in his chair by the door, rifle across his knees, Clara spoke into the darkness. "Thank you. For what? For seeing me, not what he made me, just me." His voice came soft across the shadows. "That's all I've ever seen. Clara, since the moment I found you in that ravine. Just you." She closed her eyes, holding those words close. Tomorrow would bring plans and preparations. Perhaps bloodshed. Certainly danger. But tonight, she was seen. Tonight, she was valued. Tonight, for the first time in her life, Clara Whitmore was home. The nightmare came as it always did, with the smell of whiskey and the sound of heavy boots. Clara jolted awake, sweat cold on her skin. Jebediah's phantom hands still gripping her throat. But instead of Kansas walls closing in, she saw cabin logs and firelight instead of his bulk in the doorway. Silas sat by the window, keeping watch as he had every night since the sheriff's visit. "Just a dream," he said without turning, somehow knowing she was awake. "You're safe." Safe. 3 days had passed since Briggs and his men had come calling. 3 days of waiting, preparing, jumping at every sound. The snow had started yesterday. Fat flakes that would make tracking easier but travel harder. Clara pulled the blanket closer, trying to shake off the dream's residue. "You should sleep," she said. "I can watch for a while. I'm fine. You're not. You haven't slept proper in days." He turned then, and in the firelight she could see the weariness etched in his features. "Can't sleep when I know they're coming. Maybe they won't. Maybe Jebediah decided." A sound cut her off. Horses on the trail below. Not trying for quiet. Coming bold and open, like men who believed the law gave them the right. Silas was already moving, checking the rifle. The Colt. "Get dressed. Boots and coat. Take the Winchester." Clara flew from the bed, pulled on her dress and boots with hands that barely trembled. Fear was there, but underneath it something else. Determination hard as mountain stone. She would not go back. She would not let them take her. "How many?" she asked, checking the rifle's load as he taught her. Silas peered through the window. 6, maybe 7. His voice carried grim satisfaction. He came himself. Clara's heart stuttered. After all these weeks, Jebediah had come. Part of her had hoped he'd let her go, written her off like a lost cow. But men like him didn't release what they considered theirs. "The back trail." "No." Silas turned to her, and his face held something fierce. "We talked about this. You run now, you'll run forever. Man's got to make a stand somewhere. This isn't your stand to make. The hell it isn't." He caught her shoulders, gentle despite the urgency. "You think I'd let him take you? Think I could live with that?" Hoofbeats drummed closer. Through the window, Clara could see them now. Sheriff Briggs, the ferret-faced deputy, 4 others she didn't recognize, and him. Jebediah Whitmore sat his horse like a king reviewing peasants, dressed in his best black coat, playing the respectable rancher come to retrieve his wayward property. "Clara," Silas's voice pulled her back. "Remember what I taught you. Breathe steady. Pick your target. Don't shoot unless I do. But if it starts, don't hesitate." She nodded, throat too tight for words. He squeezed her shoulder once more, then moved to the door. "That's far enough," he called out before they could knock. "State your business from there. You know our business. Kane." Briggs sounded tired, like a man doing a job he didn't relish. "Mr. Whitmore's come for his wife. We know she's here." "Don't know any such thing." Jebediah's voice cut through like a whip crack. "Enough games. Clara, get out here, now." The command in his tone made Clara's body react from old training, muscles tensing to obey before her mind caught up. She gripped the rifle tighter, using its weight to anchor herself. "I said she's not here," Silas repeated. "Liar." Jebediah dismounted, and Clara watched through the window as he strode forward. Same broad shoulders, same cruel mouth, same hands that had taught her pain. "I tracked her to that ravine, found blood on the rocks. Only one place she could have gone from there. Man finds an injured person. He helps them." Silas said, "Then they move on." "She's my wife." Jebediah bit off each word. "My property under law. You're harboring a fugitive." "Fugitive from what? Being beaten? Living in fear?" Silas stepped onto the porch, hand easy on his gun. "Yeah, I helped her, patched her up from what you did. And if she chose to move on after, that's her right as a human being. She has no rights except what I give her." Jebediah's control slipped, showing the rage beneath. "You don't know her like I do. Woman's touched in the head, needs a firm hand. Only thing she needed was to get away from you." The ferret-faced deputy spoke up. "Enough talk, mister. Whitmore's offering good money for her return. $100 now. That's enough to make any man remember where a woman went. You could offer 1,000, Silas said. Answer'd be the same. Then we'll search the place. Briggs said, legal warrant right here. Signed by what judge? Based on what evidence? Silas laughed, short and sharp. You're 200 miles from any real law. Sheriff. Out here, warrant's just paper. Out here, 6 armed men usually get what they want. The deputy said, usually. Silas's voice went soft, dangerous. But you might want to think careful. I've been polite so far. That can change. You threatening officers of the law? Briggs asked. I'm telling armed men on my property to move along. How you take that is up to you. Clara watched Jebediah's face darken. He wasn't used to being denied, especially by men he considered beneath him. His hand moved toward his gun. Don't! Silas hadn't moved, but something in his stillness made everyone freeze. You pull that iron, Whitmore. You better be ready to use it, and you better be fast, because I've got nothing to lose except what's in that cabin, and I'll die before I let you take it. She's mine, Jebediah snarled. Mine by law, by right, by the word of God himself. Your God sounds like a son of a bitch. The blasphemy cracked like a whip. Clara saw Jebediah's face go purple. He'd always wrapped his cruelty in scripture, used the Bible to justify his fists. Having that challenged openly was like striking at the core of him. Sheriff, I demand you arrest this man. For what? Briggs sounded exhausted. Being rude? Not cooperating with a search we both know ain't exactly legal? Mr. Whitmore, we rode out here as a courtesy, but Kane's right. We're past jurisdiction. Man says your wife ain't here. We got no proof otherwise. She's here, Jebediah roared. I know she is. I can smell her fear. He lunged for the door. Silas moved to block him. And in that instant, violence erupted like lightning from clear sky. Jebediah swung, a haymaker that would have felled most men. But Silas had been expecting it. He shifted, let the blow pass, and drove his fist into Jebediah's stomach. Clara watched her husband double over, gasping, and felt a wild surge of satisfaction. Someone had finally hit him back. That's enough. Briggs had his gun out, but not quite aimed. Both of you, stand down! But Jebediah was beyond reason. He came up swinging, and this time Silas didn't just defend. The fight was brief and brutal, where Jebediah relied on size and rage. Silas moved with economical precision. A blow to the jaw, another to the ribs, and Jebediah was on his knees in the dirt, blood streaming from his nose. Get up! Silas stood over him, breathing hard. Get up and get out. Don't come back. Jebediah spat blood, looked up with murder in his eyes. I'll kill you for this, and when I'm done, I'll take her back and teach her what happens when... The gunshot split the air. Everyone froze. Clara stood in the doorway, Winchester smoking, having put a bullet into the dirt inches from Jebediah's knee. No, she said, voice steady as her hands. You won't. For the first time in 7 years, she saw fear flicker in Jebediah's eyes. She'd always been the mouse, cowering, running. But here she stood with a gun and the will to use it. And he didn't know this woman. Clara, his voice shifted, trying for the honeyed tone he'd used during courtship. Darling, you're confused. Put the gun down and... I'm not confused. She stepped onto the porch, keeping the rifle trained on him. For the first time in years, I see everything clear. You're not my husband. You're the man who bought me, beat me, tried to break me, but I'm not broken anymore. You're my wife. I was your prisoner. She moved down the steps, Silas shifting to cover her flank. But I escaped, and if you come after me again, if you send men after me, if you so much as speak my name in your prayers, I'll kill you. Not because I want to, because you'll make me. She stood over him now, this man who'd loomed so large in her nightmares. He looked smaller on his knees, blood on his face, eyes darting between her gun and her face like he was trying to find the woman he'd known. You won't, he said finally. You don't have it in you. Clara smiled, and it felt like wings unfurling. You have no idea what I have in me. You never did. That's why you tried so hard to beat it out. She cocked the rifle, saw him flinch. "Sheriff Briggs." "Ma'am." "I want to report years of beatings, forced labor, and abuse by this man. I have scars as evidence. Doctor in Dodge can verify old breaks that were never properly set. I know it won't matter to the law, but I want it said, witnessed." Briggs shifted uncomfortable. "Ma'am, that's a matter between husband and wife." "No." Clara's voice cut sharp. "It's a matter of a man who commits violence thinking he's protected by law. Maybe he is, but out here, as you said, we're past jurisdiction. Out here, I can protect myself. You threatening Mr. Whitmore. I'm promising him. He knows the difference." Silence stretched taut. Then Jebediah struggled to his feet, pride warring with pragmatism on his bloodied face. He looked at Silas, at Clara, at the gun steady in her hands. "This isn't over?" he said finally. "Yes," Clara said quietly. "It is." Something in her tone, in her absolute certainty, seemed to reach him. He'd broken horses, broken men in business deals, broken her body with his fists. But standing there in the snow, he faced the unbreakable thing that trauma sometimes forges, the absolute will to survive. "Sheriff," he said finally, "we're leaving. Mr. Whitmore, now." They mounted up, Jebediah needing help from the deputy to reach his saddle. As they prepared to ride out, Briggs lingered. "Kane, ma'am." He touched his hat. "Can't say I approve of all this, but—" He glanced at Jebediah, who sat his horse like a beaten man. "Sometimes the law and what's right ain't the same thing. You folks take care." They watched the riders disappear down the trail, waited until even the sound of hoofbeats faded. Then Clara's knees gave out. Silas caught her before she hit the ground, gathered her against him as the rifle fell from nerveless fingers. "You did it," he murmured into her hair. "Faced him down, sent him running. I thought I'd feel different," she whispered. "Triumphant or something, but I just feel empty. That's the adrenaline fading. It'll pass." She pulled back to look at him, this man who'd stood between her and harm without hesitation. "You fought for me. You fought for yourself. I just cleared the path a little. Silas, so much to say. Thank you seemed too small. What you said about having nothing to lose except what's in the cabin meant every word." The snow was falling harder now, curtaining them from the world. Clara reached up, touched his face where Jebediah's ring had cut his cheek. He closed his eyes at the contact. "I'm still married," she said softly. "Still legally his. That won't change unless—" "Don't care about legal." He caught her hand, pressed it flat against his chest where she could feel his heartbeat, strong and steady. "Care about true. What's true is you're here. You're free. Rest is just paper and time." "Could be a long time. He might not give me a divorce. Might use it to—" "Clara." He waited until she met his eyes. "We've got nothing but time. These mountains don't care about marriage licenses or what some judge in Kansas says. You want to stay? Yes, then stay. Rest will sort itself." She leaned into him, felt his arms come around her, careful still but sure. Snow swirled around them, erasing the bloodstains in the dirt, covering the tracks of horses and violence, making everything clean and new. "Come on," Silas said finally. "Let's go in. Think we've earned some coffee? Maybe something stronger." Clara let him lead her inside, back to warmth and safety. The cabin felt different now, not a hiding place, but a home defended. Their home, though neither said it yet. As Silas tended the fire and Clara made coffee with hands that barely shook, she thought about the moment she'd stepped through that door with the rifle, the moment she'd chosen to fight instead of flee. She'd been so focused on Jebediah, on ending his hold over her, that she'd missed the larger truth. She'd been fighting for this, for the right to stand beside a good man in a simple cabin, for mornings learning the land and evenings by the fire, for the choice to stay or go as she pleased, for the terrifying, wonderful possibility of being loved as an equal, not owned as property. "Silas," she said as he handed her a cup laced with whiskey. I'm done running." He smiled. that rare full smile that transformed his weathered features. "Good, because I'm done letting you go." Outside, the storm built higher, sealing them in. But inside was warmth and light and the beginning of something neither dared name yet. It would come, in time. For now, it was enough to sit together, shoulders touching, while the mountains wrapped them in winter's embrace and the world beyond fell away. The town of Cedar Ridge sat in a valley 30 miles south of Silas's cabin, a collection of weathered buildings clinging to the main street like barnacles on a ship's hull. Clara had never ventured this far from the mountains since arriving, but winter supplies were running low, and more importantly, she had business to conduct. "You sure about this?" Silas asked as they tied their horses outside the general store. Clara straightened her shoulders, smoothed the new dress she'd sewn from fabric he'd brought her. "If I'm going to live free, I need to face the world, not hide from it." He nodded, understanding. They'd discussed this during the long winter nights, how isolation could become another kind of prison. She needed to test her newfound strength against more than mountains and memories. The store's proprietor, a thin woman named Mrs. Eliza Patterson, looked up sharply as they entered. Her eyes traveled from Silas to Clara, cataloging, judging. Clara felt the familiar urge to shrink, to become invisible. Instead, she met the woman's gaze straight on. "Morning, Mrs. Patterson. I need supplies and information about posting a legal notice." The woman's eyebrows climbed. "Legal notice? Abandonment of marriage. I understand territorial law requires public posting for 90 days before—" Clara let her voice trail off, watching understanding dawn on the shopkeeper's face. "You're her, the Whitmore woman." "Mrs. Patterson's voice carried a mix of scandal and curiosity. "Heard your husband came through last month, talking wild about kidnapping and corruption of wives." "Did he now?" Clara kept her tone mild as she examined bolts of cloth. "And what did folks think of his talk?" "Split opinions. Some said a wife's place is with her husband, no matter what. Others—" The woman glanced at Silas, who stood quiet but watchful by the door. "Others remembered Sarah McKinnon." "Who?" "Rancher's wife from up north. Died 2 summers back. Fell downstairs. Husband said. But we all saw the bruises before that, the broken arms that kept happening." Mrs. Patterson's mouth tightened. "Your husband reminded some folks of Mr. McKinnon. Way he talked about you like lost livestock." Clara selected her purchases carefully. Flour, salt, ammunition, fabric, necessities, but also a statement. "I'm staying. I'm building a life." About that legal notice. She said as Mrs. Patterson tallied her goods. "Newspaper office is 2 doors down. Marcus Henshaw runs it. Fair man, doesn't judge." She paused, then added quietly, "My sister fled a cruel husband once. Died trying to get back to him when the loneliness got too much. Sometimes I wonder if she'd lived. Found a good man to stand with her." Her eyes flickered to Silas again. Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks, but didn't deny the implication. In town eyes, she was a married woman living with a man not her husband. Scandal enough to ruin her in polite society. But polite society had never protected her from Jebediah's fists. "Thank you, Mrs. Patterson." The newspaper office smelled of ink and paper. Marcus Henshaw, a round man with ink-stained fingers, listened to Clara's request without judgment. "Abandonment notice. 90 days public posting. Then you can petition for divorce on grounds of desertion." He adjusted his spectacles. "Course, if your husband contests it, he'll have to come to territorial court to do it." Clara finished, and explained why his wife fled in the middle of the night with nothing but the clothes on her back. "Indeed." Henshaw pulled out forms. "There's also the matter of property, under Kansas law. I want nothing from him. No money, no land, nothing with his name on it." Clara's voice hardened. "I'll sign any papers saying so. Unusual for a woman to walk away from financial security. I'd rather be poor and free than rich and beaten." Henshaw's pen scratched across paper. As Clara signed her name, her own name, not Mrs. Jebediah Whitmore. She felt another chain break. They were loading supplies when trouble found them. 3 cowboys lounged outside the saloon, afternoon drunk and looking for entertainment. Clara recognized the type, men who felt big making others feel small. Well, the runaway wife. The tallest, a scarred man with mean eyes, pushed off the wall. Whitmore's offering $100 to anyone who tells him where you're hiding. Then tell him, Clara said calmly. Cedar Ridge, territorial land, beyond his reach. Maybe I'll just take you back myself. Collect that reward. Silas shifted, hand dropping to his gun, but Clara touched his arm, stepped forward herself. Try it. The cowboy laughed. You threatening me, woman? I'm informing you. She kept her voice level, though her heart raced. I've got a rifle on my saddle and the skill to use it. More importantly, I've got the will. First man who lays hands on me gets a bullet. Maybe not killing, but definitely hurting. Hard to work cattle when you can't sit a horse. You mouthy little... Jake. The voice came from behind them. A man wearing a deputy's badge stepped out of the sheriff's office. These folks giving you trouble? Just having a conversation. Deputy Morrison, Jake said, but his bravado had dimmed. Conversation's over. Move along. The cowboys grumbled but dispersed. Deputy Morrison, young and serious-faced, touched his hat to Clara. Ma'am, heard about your situation. Want you to know Sheriff Tucker runs a clean town. No one's dragging anyone anywhere against their will on our watch. Thank you, Deputy. Thank you, ma'am. Takes courage. What you're doing, standing up public-like. He glanced between her and Silas. Both of you. As they rode out of town, supplies packed and legal notices filed, Clara felt the weight of eyes and whispers, but also something else, respect from some, understanding from others. Not everyone, but enough. You did well, Silas said when Cedar Ridge fell behind them. I was terrified. Didn't show. That's what matters, isn't it? Not being fearless, just not letting fear win. He smiled. Woman's learning. They camped that night by a stream, not pushing to reach the cabin. The spring evening was mild, stars thick overhead. Clara found herself watching Silas as he tended the fire, the efficient grace of his movements, the way firelight caught in his dark eyes. Can I ask you something? She said. Always? That first day, when Jebediah came, you said you'd lost someone. Your fault. You said... His hand stilled. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, her name was Mary, my wife. The words came slow, pulled from deep places. We had a farm in Missouri, small place, but ours. I was 25, thought I knew everything, thought I could protect what was mine. Clara waited, sensing the weight of this telling. Border raiders came through in '79, demanding supplies, horses. I refused, thought I was defending my property, my pride. His voice went flat. They burned the barn first, when Mary ran out to free the horses. He stopped. Clara moved closer, not touching but offering presence. Shot her down like she was nothing, died in my arms while the house burned. He stared into the fire, all for pride, for things that could be replaced. Lost the only thing that couldn't. It wasn't your fault. Wasn't it? He looked at her then. I chose property over prudence. Chose to fight when I should have bent. Mary paid for my choice. Clara thought of all the times she'd bent, submitted, survived. How she'd hated herself for it. Sometimes there's no right choice, just different kinds of hurt. Maybe, he added wood to the fire. Came out here after, figured a man who couldn't protect what mattered didn't deserve another chance. What changed? His eyes found hers across the flames. You fell into my life. Literally fell, bleeding and broken and still fighting. Made me remember why protecting something matters. Made me want to try again. The words hung between them like stars, bright and distant and achingly beautiful. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. I'm not Mary. No, you're Clara. Different kind of strong. He smiled sadly. She would have liked you. They sat in companionable silence, listening to the stream and the night birds. Finally. Clara spoke. "The deputy today. He linked us together. People will talk. Let them. It could hurt your reputation." "What reputation? I'm a hermit who lives in the mountains." "You're the one taking risks, letting people know where you are, that you're with me. I'm not ashamed." The words came fierce. "Let them see. Let them talk. I know what we are." "What are we?" His voice went soft, almost vulnerable. Clara considered all the things they were: survivors, partners, teacher and student, protector and protected. But underneath all that, simpler and more complex, we're two people choosing each other every day. We choose. That's more than most married folks can say. Silas looked at her long, something shifting in his expression. Then he rose, moved to his saddle, pulled something from the bags. "Been meaning to give you this." It was a book, poetry. She saw Wordsworth. The pages were worn, margins noted in faded ink. "Was Mary's," he said quietly. "Think she'd want you to have it." Clara's throat closed. She understood the weight of this gift. Not just a book, but trust, acceptance, the beginning of letting her into spaces grief had sealed. "Thank you." She held it carefully, like the precious thing it was. "Will you read some? I never learned proper, just enough for Bible verses and household accounts." So he read by firelight, voice soft in the darkness, poems about nature and loss and the terrible beauty of being human. Clara listened and watched him. This man who'd chosen isolation but was choosing connection again, word by careful word. When he stopped, she spoke into the quiet. "Teach me. Reading. I mean, proper reading. Add it to the list. Shooting, tracking, riding, now letters." But he was smiling. "Going to make a regular frontier woman of you. I want to be more than that." She met his eyes. "I want to be educated, free, my own person who chooses to stand beside you. Not because I need protection, but because I want partnership. You're already that, Clara." "Not yet, but I'm becoming." Later, wrapped in separate bedrolls but only feet apart, Clara stared at the stars and thought about the journey from that night in Kansas to now. The body that had known only violence was learning gentleness. The mind trained to submission was discovering thought. The heart that had armored itself was carefully, terrifyingly, opening. "Silas?" she whispered. Today in town. I wasn't afraid of Jebediah finding me." "No, I was afraid of disappointing you, of not being strong enough." She heard him shift, saw his silhouette rise on one elbow. "Clara, you faced down 3 drunk cowboys and filed legal papers with your real name. You stood in that store like you belonged there, like you belonged anywhere you chose to be. Disappoint me, woman, you astonish me." The words settled over her like a blanket. She closed her eyes, held them close. "Don't stop," she whispered. "Whatever happens, don't stop seeing me that way. Couldn't if I tried." The courtroom in Cedar Ridge was packed despite the early hour. Word had spread that the Whitmore divorce hearing would be today, and it seemed half the territory had come to witness it. Clara sat beside Marcus Henshaw, who'd agreed to speak for her, wearing the blue dress she'd sewn herself. Simple but respectable. Nothing like the finery Jebediah had once demanded. Silas sat in the gallery behind her, steady as a mountain. His presence anchored her, though they were careful not to touch, not to give ammunition to those who would use their relationship against her case. Judge Theodore Blackwood, silver-haired and stern-faced, called the hearing to order. "The matter before us is the petition of Mrs. Clara Whitmore for divorce on grounds of abandonment and cruelty. Mr. Whitmore has filed a counter-petition demanding his wife's return." Clara's stomach tightened as Jebediah entered, flanked by 2 lawyers from Kansas. He wore his best suit, hair slicked, playing the respectable businessman wronged by a hysterical wife. Their eyes met across the courtroom. He smiled, cold and certain. "Mr. Whitmore," the judge began, "you claim your wife left without cause." "She did, Your Honor." Jebediah's voice carried wounded dignity. I came home to find her gone, along with money from our household funds. I've been searching for her out of concern for her welfare. My wife is delicate, given to fancies, needs firm guidance. Mrs. Whitmore, the judge turned to her. Do you wish to respond? Clara stood. Her knees trembled, but her voice came clear. I left with $3.47 I'd saved from household money over months. I took nothing else because I wanted nothing that carried his touch. And why did you leave? This was the moment. Clara could feel the courtroom's attention like weight. Some faces showed sympathy, others skepticism. A few women leaned forward, recognizing something in her story. Because I feared for my life. That's a serious accusation. It's a serious truth. Clara lifted her chin. May I show evidence? Your Honor? The judge nodded. Clara turned to the courtroom and slowly, deliberately, rolled up her left sleeve. The scars showed clear in the morning light. Old burns from a poker, ridged and ugly. He said I let his supper burn. She rolled up the other sleeve, revealing more scars, the crooked bend of a badly healed break. This was for speaking to a neighbor without permission. Gasps rippled through the crowd. She heard someone whisper, Dear Lord, lies! Jebediah surged to his feet. She's clumsy, always has been, fell down, burned herself cooking. Shall I show the scars on my back? Clara asked quietly. From the belt, or the ones hidden by my collar, I have 7 years' worth of evidence written on my body. Mr. Whitmore, would you like to explain them all? Your Honor. One of Jebediah's lawyers intervened smoothly. Even if these unfortunate injuries occurred, the law is clear. A husband has the right to discipline. To discipline. Clara interrupted. Not to torture, not to break bones, not to burn flesh. I'm not property to be broken to his will. I'm a human being who chose to survive by leaving. You took vows, Jebediah snarled, mask slipping, to honor and obey. And you took vows to cherish and protect. Clara faced him fully. Which of us broke faith first? Judge Blackwood rapped his gavel. Order, Mrs. Whitmore. Do you have witnesses to these claims? I have one, Your Honor. Clara's voice steadied. Myself, I witnessed every blow, every burn. Every night I lay still as death, hoping he wouldn't notice me. I witnessed my own survival. That's not... And I have this. Clara pulled out a worn paper. A doctor's statement from Dodge City, documenting injuries consistent with repeated violence. Doctor, Mills treated me twice when the damage was too severe to hide. The judge examined the paper, his expression grave. Mr. Whitmore, do you deny these injuries occurred? A man has rights in his own home. Do you deny them? Jebediah's face flushed dark. She provoked me, defiant, willful. A proper wife wouldn't need... So you admit to causing these injuries? The courtroom went silent. Jebediah's lawyers whispered urgently. But the damage was done. She's my wife, he said finally. Stubborn as stone. Mine by law and covenant. Whatever happened between us is private business. Not anymore. The judge said, Mrs. Whitmore made it public by filing for divorce. By territorial law. I must consider evidence of cruelty. Your Honor. Henshaw spoke up. We also wish to note that Mr. Whitmore allowed the 90-day abandonment period to pass without locating his wife. Despite claims of searching, he made no legal filing until after she filed for divorce. Because I was trying to handle it privately, as a family matter. You came to my home with 6 armed men, a voice called from the gallery. Silas had stood, drawing all eyes. That didn't seem private, seemed more like a raid. Mr. Kane, the judge said, you're not a party to this case. No, sir, but I witnessed Mr. Whitmore's behavior when he came hunting his wife. Saw him attack me for refusing to hand her over like lost property. Man who'd beat another man for protecting an injured woman might do worse to the woman herself. He's the one who stole her. Jebediah pointed at Silas. Corrupted her, turned her against me. Nobody stole me. Clara's voice cut through his rage. I'm not a horse or a milk cow to be stolen. I left, I chose, and yes, Silas Kane helped me when I was injured and alone. He showed me kindness without price. Respect without ownership. If that's corruption, I'll take it over sanctified cruelty. The judge looked between them all. Clara standing straight despite her trembling. Silas solid and watchful. Jebediah red-faced with rage his lawyers couldn't quite contain. I've heard enough. Mrs. Whitmore, your petition for divorce is granted on grounds of extreme cruelty and constructive abandonment. Mr. Whitmore, you are ordered to pay— I want nothing from him, Clara interrupted. No money, no property. Just my freedom and my name. I'll take back my father's name. Clara Thornton. Unusual, but acceptable. The marriage is dissolved, Miss Thornton. You are free to go. Free to go. 3 words that remade the world. Jebediah erupted. You can't do this. She's mine. 7 years. 7 years of what you call marriage. I call imprisonment. Clara said, It's over. Jebediah, find another woman to break. Though I pray God you never do. She turned to leave, but Jebediah lunged forward. You whore! You'll pay for this humiliation! Silas moved faster than thought, putting himself between them. But it was Deputy Morrison who grabbed Jebediah, forced him back. Touch her, and I'll arrest you. Morrison said firmly, Divorce is final. She's not your wife anymore. Just a woman you got no claim on. Clara walked out of the courthouse into morning sun that seemed brighter than any she remembered. People clustered on the steps, some disapproving, others curious. But one woman, old and weathered, caught her arm gently. Good for you, girl. Wish I'd had your courage 40 years back. Others murmured agreement. Not everyone, but enough. Enough to know she wasn't alone. Silas appeared at her elbow. How does it feel? Like flying, like drowning, like being born. She laughed, shaky but real. I don't know what to do with it. Whatever you want, that's the point. They'd reached the horses when Jebediah emerged from the courthouse, his lawyers trying to restrain him. His eyes found Clara, promising vengeance without words. He won't let this go, she said quietly. Neither will we. Silas helped her mount, his hands lingering a moment at her waist. But that's tomorrow's problem. Today, you're free. What do you want to do with your first day? Clara considered. For 7 years, every moment had been dictated, controlled, survived. Now the whole world spread before her, vast as the sky. I want to go home, she said. To our cabin. I want to cook what I please and read poetry badly and sit by the fire without fear. I want to be Clara Thornton in a place where that's enough. Then let's go home. They rode out of Cedar Ridge side by side, not touching but connected by something stronger than physical contact. Behind them, Jebediah raged and threatened. Ahead, the mountains rose like a promise. At the top of the first ridge, Clara reined in her horse. The valley spread below, the town small and distant. She could see the courthouse, the street where she'd faced down cowboys, the newspaper office where she'd signed her real name. Thank you, she said to Silas, for standing with me, for not trying to speak for me. You didn't need me to. You had your own voice. Just needed space to use it. I love you. The words came simple as breathing. Not because you saved me, because you let me save myself. His breath caught. Clara, I know we can't marry. Not yet, maybe not for a long while. Depending on what the law says about. She gestured between them. But I wanted you to know. I choose you. Every day. I choose you. Not from need, but from want. He reached across the space between their horses, took her hand. I loved you before I knew I could love again. Loved your strength when you didn't know you had it. Love you more now that you do. They sat there, hands linked, mountains rising around them like witnesses. Then Silas smiled, that rare, full smile that transformed him. Come on, Clara Thornton, let's go home. She smiled back, feeling the name settle on her shoulders like wings. Clara Thornton, not wife, not property, not victim, just herself, choosing her path, riding toward a cabin where she was wanted but not owned, loved but not possessed. The sun climbed higher, burning off morning mist. Birds called from the pines, and Clara Thornton rode toward her future, finally and fully free. That evening, in the cabin that had become home, Clara lit candles she'd bought in town, small luxuries that would have earned punishment before. She cooked a meal seasoned to her taste, sat in the chair she preferred, spoke when she wished, and stayed silent when she didn't. Silas watched her with quiet joy, seeing her unfold like a flower too long kept in darkness. When she laughed at something in the poetry book, her reading still halting but determined, he thought his heart might break from fullness. "Will you teach me to write better?" she asked. "I want to send a letter." "Who to?" "The woman at the courthouse. The one who wished she'd had courage. I want to tell her it's never too late. That courage can be learned." She paused. "And maybe to other women, if one reads it and finds strength. We'll start tomorrow. Letters first, then words, then sentences. Soon you'll be writing books. Just letters for now, but letters that matter." As night settled over the mountains, they sat together, not as man and wife, but as two people choosing each other freely. Outside, wolves howled in the distance, wild and free as Clara felt. Inside was warmth and safety, and the quiet revolution of a woman writing her own story at last. 10 years had passed since Clara Thornton walked free from a Cedar Ridge courthouse. The cabin had grown into a proper homestead, with a larger house built by Silas's hands and Clara's design. Gardens flourished where once only wild grass grew. The rifle still hung by the door, but these days it was more often used for hunting than defense. Clara sat at her writing desk, silver threading through her blonde hair, finishing another letter. The desk was covered with correspondence from women across 3 territories, women who'd read her story in the newspaper series Marcus Henshaw had helped her publish, women who'd found courage in her words to seek their own freedom. "Another one?" Silas asked, bringing her coffee. His own hair had gone gray at the temples, but his eyes were warm as ever. "From California, a young woman whose husband drinks. She wants to know how to leave safely." Clara sealed the letter with care. "I'll send her the information about the sanctuary in San Francisco, the one Ruth Morrison started." Ruth Morrison, the deputy's wife who'd approached Clara after the divorce, asking how she could help other women. Together they'd built a network, quiet but strong, of safe houses and sympathetic souls. A knock at the door interrupted them. Silas answered, hand still automatically checking for the gun he rarely needed anymore. "Please," a young voice said. "Are you Mrs. Kane? Miss Thornton. I need help." The girl couldn't be more than 19, pretty despite the bruise darkening her left eye. She clutched a carpetbag like her life depended on it. "Come in," Clara said gently. "You're safe here." The story tumbled out over tea and Clara's famous cornbread, married at 16 to a man her father chose. 3 years of escalating violence, a baby lost to a beating. Finally, the courage to run. "I heard about you in Tucson." The girl, Emma Garrett, said, "They say you help women like us. They say you understand." "I do." Clara reached across the table, covered Emma's shaking hands with her steady ones. "And you're not alone. What do you need? Shelter? Legal help? Safe passage somewhere?" "I don't know. I just want to not be afraid anymore." Clara remembered that feeling, that desperate wish for fear to end. That takes time, but it starts with being safe. "Silas, could you ready the spare room?" As he left, Emma looked between them. "Are you married now?" "Yes, 2 years now. Once the law allowed it." Clara smiled. "But Silas understands. This is my work, and he supports it." "Your husband doesn't mind strange women showing up?" "My husband knows what it means to need sanctuary. We both do." Emma stayed 3 weeks, healing in body and spirit. Clara taught her to read better, to shoot straight, to hold her head high in town. When she was ready, they arranged passage to an aunt in Oregon who'd welcome her. "How can I repay you?" Emma asked the morning she left. "Help another when you can." Clara said, "That's payment enough." After Emma's stage departed, Clara and Silas rode up to their favorite overlook, the valley spread below. touched with spring's green. Eagles circled on thermals, free as wind. 43 women so far, Silas said. 43 you've helped find freedom. We've helped. Couldn't do it without you. I just provide the safe walls. You provide the courage. Clara leaned into him, feeling the familiar comfort of his presence. Remember what I said that first night? Just don't make me feel again. Remember, I was so afraid of feeling, thought numbness was safety. She looked up at him. Thank you for being patient while I learned the difference between feeling and healing. Thank you for teaching me that protecting someone doesn't mean caging them. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the day paint shadows across the land. Then Clara spoke again. I got a letter yesterday, from Kansas. Silas tensed slightly. Jebediah? His lawyer, Jebediah, died last month. Apoplexy, they said. Probably the drink and rage finally caught up. She felt nothing, or perhaps everything, too tangled to name. He never remarried, never stopped telling people I'd be back. How do you feel about it? Clara considered. Free, finally, truly free. Not just legally, but... She touched her chest. Here, like the last chain just broke. That evening, neighbors gathered for Clara's monthly reading circle. The parlor filled with women of all ages, ranchers' wives, shopkeepers, the new school teacher, even some of the saloon girls from town. Clara read from a new book of poetry by a woman writer from Massachusetts, her voice clear and strong. Later, as good nights were said, old Mrs. Patterson pressed Clara's hand. You've changed this valley, given us all permission to be more than we were told we could be. After everyone left, Clara found Silas on the porch, whittling by moonlight. She settled beside him, content in the quiet. Any regrets? He asked. About what? This life. It's not what most women want. Taking in strays, fighting other people's battles, living on the edge of respectable. Clara laughed. I've never been respectable. Don't see why I should start now. She grew serious. My only regret is that I didn't find my courage sooner, but perhaps I found it exactly when I needed to. A coyote called in the distance, answered by another. Wild voices in the darkness, free as Clara had learned to be. I've been thinking, she said, about that girl who knocked on your door 10 years ago, broken and bleeding and sure she'd never be whole again. She was stronger than she knew. But she needed someone to see it first, to believe it when she couldn't. Clara took his weathered hand, held it against her cheek. You gave me that. A place to heal, space to grow, love without conditions. You gave me purpose again, reason to open the door, to let the world back in. They rose together, walked inside to the home they'd built, not just of wood and stone, but of trust and choice, of two broken people who'd helped each other heal. On Clara's desk, another letter waited to be written. Tomorrow she'd tell another woman that freedom was possible, that bruises fade, that the human spirit can survive almost anything if given half a chance. But tonight, she simply lived her hard-won life. She read by lamplight while Silas played the guitar he'd finally taken down from the wall. She laughed when he hit a wrong note, suggested he needed as much practice as she'd needed with the rifle. At least my bad notes don't put holes in the walls, he teased back. This was what she'd fought for, not just absence of fear, but presence of joy. Not just survival, but life abundant. Not just freedom from, but freedom to. To laugh, to choose, to love, to be. As she prepared for bed, Clara caught sight of herself in the mirror. The woman looking back bore scars. Yes, but also laugh lines. Carried sorrow, but also strength. Was marked by her past, but not defined by it. Hello, Clara Thornton, she whispered to her reflection. You survived, you thrived, you helped others do the same. The wind sang through the pines, carrying the scent of spring and possibilities. Somewhere out there, another woman might be planning her escape, gathering courage coin by coin. Clara's letters would be waiting. A lifeline thrown across the darkness. You are not alone. You are stronger than you know. Freedom is possible. And in the cabin where it all began, Clara Thornton Kane lived her answer. Proof that broken things can mend, that love without ownership exists, that sometimes the greatest rebellion is simply choosing to be happy. The mountains stood witness, ancient and enduring. And if they could speak, they would tell of the woman who came to them bleeding and left them whole, who turned her pain into purpose, who learned that feeling again wasn't the enemy. It was the beginning of everything. Thank you for listening to this story of love and courage in the Wild West. I hope Clara and Silas's journey touched your heart as much as it did mine. Where are you listening from today? Please share in the comments below. I'd love to connect with fellow Western romance enthusiasts from around the world. Don't forget to subscribe to From Wild West channel for more tales of frontier passion and resilience. Your thoughts and feedback mean everything to us. Until next time, keep riding toward your own sunset of freedom and love.